It was here? My companion confirms this is where the wall stood, and behind it, no man's land. 20 years ago, there weren't any trees here. The no man's land separating East and West Germany was strictly off limits. I'm strolling along the historic Berlin Wall Trail with Wolfgang Krüger. He was mayor of Berlin's Tempelhof district until 1997. We're both West Berliners. It's a nice feeling to walk as far as you want here. Krüger tells me it took him a really long time to get used to it. Now you can roam wherever you like. Wolfgang Krüger has lived here since 1945. He's familiar with how the area was before, during, and after the wall. I, on the other hand, was born after it was built. As a child, I went on walks with my parents here, and all of a sudden there was this concrete wall in the way. I tell Krüger how I used to ask my father why I couldn't go and see what was on the other side, and that my father explained it was actually the other way around. People on the other side couldn't come over to our side. I didn't understand the reasons why until a lot later. Krüger says when he was young, he used to go over with a knapsack. He remembers what it was like before the wall, but it's a distant memory now. He recalls once when his backpack was opened and they slid open his toothpaste to inspect what was inside. He said that's something you don't forget. A monument reminds passers-by where the border used to be. Nothing remains of the actual wall, as in most places where it used to stand here in my hometown, Berlin. In the Berlin Wall Museum, I look at how the border between East and West Berlin used to be set up. As a child, I assumed there were walls everywhere. I didn't know life any other way. Whenever I visited other cities with my parents, I always asked them where the wall was. I've arranged to meet Stefan Butschke, an old friend from my school days who lived right on the border. On the other side of the canal is where West Berlin ended. That's where the wall stood. Stefan says not even so much as a blade of grass grew here. Stefan's parents' old house is right next to the canal. Today it's deserted. It's going to be torn down like the wall before it. We used to have a lot of parties here. We didn't have to worry about complaints from neighbors. Not so many people wanted to live so close to the wall. Stefan used to be able to see where the wall stood. I asked him where it was. He says he used to look out this window until he was 20 years old. The wall was only a stone's throw away in that direction. There weren't any trees back then, and he had a direct view across. It was lit up bright as day every night. Stefan says a little bit to the left there was a watchtower that was constantly occupied. The guards always looked over in his direction. Since they were at the same height, he says they looked at each other eye to eye here. Stefan wants to show me where he lives today. This bridge didn't exist 20 years ago. It connects east and west. He points out the Allende Quarter, a huge 1970s development project. Stefan lives in the heart of what used to be East Berlin. For 20 years, I was unable to look around this part of Berlin that was unknown to me. Now an old friend who moved from the west to the east is showing me around. Together with Stefan, I look at images that moved all of Germany 20 years ago. People were overjoyed at the fall of the wall.
Das hier ist jetzt gleich ganz schön, was kommt. Eine wunderbare Szene.
A board of art announces in bureaucratic German that no offenses will be prosecuted here. So a confused woman asks whether that means she can go and visit her mother and father on the other side. It's fun to watch these pictures today. But back then, Stefan and I weren't so euphoric. Of course we were happy, but we didn't know if it would be all over the next day. And that night 20 years ago, we just simply couldn't believe that the wall had actually fallen. I asked Stefan if he felt a bit afraid about what was happening, or if he had doubts. He says no, and explains that Berliners are a different lot. He, like other Berliners, was preoccupied with his own day-to-day existence. It didn't change the fact that he still had to go to work the next day. For people who worked in the bank, the days following the 9th of November were anything but normal. I remember how East Germans waited in long lines in front of West Berlin banks to pick up what was called their welcome money. Each East German citizen received 100 D-marks, or about 50 euros. I spoke with Eckhard von Wick, one of the bank employees, who recalls what it was like back then. What he remembers most is that it was extremely cold. To him it seemed like minus 10 or 15 degrees Celsius. People were freezing, especially children. He said the bank was concerned about how to accommodate the huge crowds. Even I remember that for several days, whenever I walked to the subway, I saw lines in front of the bank. Those pictures are ingrained in my mind. Eckhard von Wick says that the line was from the bank to the subway station and back again, about 3 kilometers. The bank couldn't keep up, he says. Its capacity was being completely exhausted. They were used to serving 4,000 or 5,000 people a day. As a small branch office, 6,500, 6,700 people a day was their absolute capacity.
Menschen pro Tag an der absoluten Grenze ankamen.
I've been working with cameraman Hans-Jürgen Kasuba for more than 7 years. He came to Berlin shortly before the wall came down. On the night of November 9th, he went to bed early. That night, he got a call from his broadcaster. He tells me his girlfriend was half asleep when she picked up. A dispatcher asked her if he could come into work. She replied Hans-Jürgen had already been into work and that tomorrow was his day off. Without even saying what the reason was, the dispatcher said thank you. She then called a colleague of Hans-Jürgen's, who was the one who got to film history unfolding. He missed it, unfortunately, he adds. Since then, Hans-Jürgen has been using his camera to document the changes in Berlin. Here along the former Bornholmer Straße crossing is where it all began 20 years ago. Today, a small monument with a built-in audio guide recalls the events.
On the night of the 9th to the 10th of November 1989, the checkpoint became famous all over the world. The first barrier was opened here in response to pressure from East German citizens. Within an hour, some 20,000 people managed to cross the Börsebrücke bridge without being checked.
Crossing over the Bornholmer Straße bridge from east to west 20 years ago was a sensation. Today, it's hardly a special experience. For me and other Berliners, it's hard to believe that a wall once separated people here.